All right, we've taken a look at how Reconstruction was handled in different ways, but what we need to take a look at now is a first for American history. There's this growing tension between the presidency and the Congress. The president, being a Southern Democrat, trying to be very forgiving, makes Congress very angry. And this angry Congress, controlled by radical Northern Republicans, wants to punish the president and actually wants to do whatever they can in order to keep control for themselves, because they're worried that the president is going to undo all of the things that they have tried to do. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was, instead of just trying to keep the president weak, was they wanted to try and get rid of Andrew Johnson specifically altogether. And in order to do this, Congress hatches a plan. What they figured they'll do is they will pass a law that the president does not want to follow. Once the president refuses to follow the law, then that means that that would be grounds for impeachment. Now, all the Constitution says about impeachment is that it's for high crimes and misdemeanors. And that phrase has taken on a lot of different meaning over the 2 centuries since the Constitution was written. But since the radical Republicans in the House of Representatives would control the process of impeachment, then they could make it mean whatever they want it to mean. And so in 1867, they passed the Tenure of Office Act. What the Tenure of Office Act says is that since the president's advisors, essentially the cabinet, are all approved by the Senate, then the president should not be able to get rid of any of his advisors unless also approved by the Senate. And so essentially what this act will do is it will force the president to keep his advisors even though he may not want them. Now, Andrew Johnson had kept a lot of Lincoln's advisors because it made the transition easier. It was very rare that a vice president would take over for a president, and so there wasn't that much tradition to let the new president know what he could do. Edwin M. Stanton, who was Secretary of War at the time, was one of these radical Republicans. He wanted to punish the South. And the two of them, Andrew Johnson and Edwin Stanton, didn't get along at all. And so Congress looks at this, and they know that eventually Andrew Johnson is going to end up firing Edwin M. Stanton. Stanton was so against Andrew Johnson that he ends up siding with the radical Republicans in Congress and would report to these radical Republicans everything that Andrew Johnson did. And so if Andrew Johnson was going to enforce a law, was not going to enforce a law, was going to want to do this thing in the budget, was going to want to do that thing, all of those actions that the president would normally be able to take on his own would be reported to the Congress, and then Congress would do something in order to prevent President Johnson's plans. So Andrew Johnson knows that he's got a spy in his own cabinet who's reporting to the Republicans, and he figures that that spy is Edwin Stanton. The two never agreed anyway, and so Andrew Johnson finally decides to get rid of Edwin Stanton from his cabinet. This provokes the Tenure of Office Act. Because Edwin Stanton was approved by the Senate, he was not allowed to be fired unless the Senate also approved. Because President Johnson just went ahead and fired Edwin Stanton, this meant that the president was breaking the law, and according to the Republicans, that was enough for him to be impeached. And so the House of Representatives votes to impeach President Johnson for high crimes and misdemeanors on a vote of 126 to 47. In the process of impeachment, once the House votes to impeach someone, they are impeached. The impeachment is just the trial. It is not the punishment that comes from the trial. And so impeachment does not mean removed from office. Those are two completely separate things. Somebody can be removed from office after they are impeached, but just because they are impeached does not mean that they are automatically removed from office. The Senate, who tries the impeachment case, can decide a whole variety of different punishments. Only one of them is removal from office. And so when we say that somebody's been impeached, it just means that they are put on trial. It doesn't mean that they are punished for that crime. So there's a big distinction there that you need to remember. On May 16th, 1868, the Radicals failed to remove President Johnson by one vote. They needed a 2/3 vote in order to actually remove him from office. And one senator, one Republican, broke away from his party and voted with the Democrats in order to leave President Johnson in office. And so it was a failed attempt to remove the president, but it was the first time the president had ever been impeached. And so they were able to make up a lot of the rules themselves and were able to actually do this when they probably shouldn't have been allowed. But by this point, we're now going to see what is known as the rise of the Solid South. What we mean by Solid South is that everybody who gets elected to office in the South is going to be a Democrat. The South is going to be firmly in control of the Democrats for the next 100 or so years. And so the Republican Party has no chance there. What they have to make sure that they do is they have to make sure that they hold on to other sections of the country in order to maintain control over the government. And so we will go from there to different opinions of African Americans.